So good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yes, I'm always amazed at women that we can get up so early, get our good clothes on, and our hair done, and our makeup on, and it's like 7:30. So good on you, everybody, for getting here. You'll have to excuse this, this iPad. I try to be sleek and ladylike, but we mentioned that I have a set of 6-year-old triplets, so this is in the hands of my kids more than me. So this is military-grade iPad cover. You could blow something up, and this would still survive. Anyway, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
Premier Wynne. I haven't had a chance to say congratulations in person yet. The last time I saw you, we were at a community function, and you hadn't started your leadership campaign yet, so congratulations in person.
Thank you.
And nice to be here with you this morning.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, I look out at this crowd, and I remember the first meeting I went to as the Minister of Transportation, and I had just come from education, and the crowd looked exactly the reverse of this. And I said to the Premier, "You've put me in the boys' playground." Unbelievable.
We're going to get into some of that in a little bit. First, I wanted to ask you, what did you have to do to get here this morning?
What did I? Well, I don't have triplets. So
most people don't.
I think this woman is a phenom, really. You know, normally what I do in the morning is I try to go for a run. People say to me, well, you know, where do you do your exercise? And I have to do it in the morning because by the end of the day, first of all, it's unpredictable when the day will end. And in the morning, I have quiet. Now, in this job now, I'm not alone when I go for my run.
How many people are with you?
Well, there's someone either running or biking with me, and then there's a car creeping along. So it's, and they're lovely people, the OPP, it's fantastic to have them with me, but it's just a change.
I bet it is. So what time around would you have to get up at, like 6, at 5?
I get up between 5:30 and 6.
Wow.
5:30 and 6
And typically what time does your day end?
Well, typically I'm done an event by 9:30 or 10. That's typical. Last night we had the privilege of going to the opening of Stratford, so we saw Romeo and Juliet, which was fantastic, by the way. But the ending's still the same. I keep hoping one of these times it's going to be a different ending. She's going to move her arm and he's going to see it, or, you know. But that didn't happen. So I didn't get home till midnight, but that's unusual. That's unusual. I'm a morning person, and I try to organize my days so that I'm home by 10-ish, so that I can do the reading that I need to do for the next day.
Wow. So once you get home, there's still work to do.
There's the preparation for the next day, which is not, you know, it's not huge. It's not like I'm reading 300-page briefing books, but I have to know what I'm doing the next day and just get myself prepared and know, you know, who I'm going to be talking to at 7:30 in the morning.
Right. What's been the biggest change for you since becoming Premier?
Well, I think that just on a mundane level, that issue of never being alone, that is really a change. And you know, Jane, my partner Jane Rounthwaite, is here with me, and the notion that, you know, I can't go anywhere unless I let someone know where I'm going. So if we want to go to the store, I need to let someone know that I'm doing that. So that's sort of the
it's like being a teenager
logistical.
Again, really.
It is a bit like being a teenager. And I have those same thoughts. How am I going to escape? But I don't.
They're all getting nervous. They're looking at you now.
To my detail in the room, it's okay. I don't. Yeah. So there's that. But it was interesting. I had an opportunity to have a meeting with a few of the other premiers from, Alison Redford was here from Alberta, and Kathy Dunderdale from Newfoundland, and Gary Selinger, and they talked about their various strategies around dealing. Gary Selinger drives himself. He doesn't have a, yeah. So that's sort of on a logistical, personal level is a big change. I think the biggest change, it's not that my days are that much busier or that I have more meetings, because I've been a minister for 6 or 7 years now, and so I've had a lot of opportunity to experience the constancy and the pace of a busy political life. But now a couple of things are different. I'm changing files every time I meet. So it's not I'm meeting on education.
Right.
It's that I'm having a different discussion depending on the person who's coming in, and it could be from any one of the various sectors. And then there's this sense of, okay, I'm having a meeting, I'm going to have a conversation with my policy folks, and we're going to make a decision. And when I read in the newspaper that the Premier has said something, that's me.
Yeah.
And I had this surreal experience when, just after the leadership, and there was an article about the Premier, or there was an article about an issue, and I read the article and I thought, well, I wonder what the boss is going to think about that. And then I thought, oh, okay, what do I think about that? So it was just that, repositioning. So the change is that there's that diversity of files and what Jane calls it, the mantle of responsibility that it's just different. It's a different sense of how I'm interacting with these issues and the responsibility that I have to take in bringing people around me to make a decision. And I would never suggest that it's a sense of making a decision on my own. I mean, I think that is, that's an important message that when I'm talking to young women, I always say, this is not a loner sport. You're in a team. You're part of a team. And anyone who suggests that making decisions by yourself is the way it works isn't understanding the actual process. But at the end of the day, I have to be comfortable with the decision that's been made because I'm going to have to defend it. And I'm going to be asked about it. And I'm going to, people are going to look to me as though I made the decision by myself, even though I didn't.
Right.
And so I have to work through that on every one of our decisions. And as we have this discussion around transit in the GTHA, that's a perfect example of a very, very complex file that's going to take a huge amount of discussion to actually get to the decision point. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to stand up and say, I take responsibility for this, and I believe in the direction that we're going in.
Okay, well, because you brought up transit, I'm going to ask you this question very quickly. Yesterday we saw the platform released from Metrolinx,
right.
And it basically works out to $500 more per household in the province of Ontario. We're looking at higher GST, we're looking at gas tax. What are you going to do if you can't convince people in Ontario this is what we need to do to pay for transit?
So first of all, those recommendations that have come from Metrolinx are one set of recommendations. It's one set of recommendations. There are other things that we can look at, and in fact, Metrolinx lists a number of other possible tools that could be used. It's important input. There's been input from the Toronto Board of Trade. There's been input from the Toronto Civic Action. There are mayors around the GTHA who are interested in this discussion. So I see it as a very critical next step in making that final decision. So that's exactly what I meant when I said that over the next few months, we're going to have to decide collectively exactly how we want to build transit. What I'm not going to back down on is the fact that we need a dedicated revenue stream to build transit. Whether we're talking about the whole province paying for that dedicated revenue stream in the GTHA, or whether we start with the GTHA with some investments from the people who live and work in this region, that's part of the discussion, and we're going to have to make those decisions. We're going to have to make them quickly because we need to get the projects in the big move beyond the planning stage, the next phase. So I'm very optimistic. It's interesting. There's an article in the paper this morning about how there are two levels of decision making. There's a decision making process at Queen's Park that's going to happen, and that's a very political one. And then there's the broader discussion among the public. And I think in some ways the public in the GTHA is ahead of us in terms of the politics of this, because people who are trying to get their kids to daycare, people who are trying to get to and from work, they know that we can't wait to build transit. They know that we need to do this. They know that we're 30 years behind.
Right.
And so they may not right now have a sense of exactly how much money they're willing to pay to get the transit built, but they know we have to do something. The discussion that happens at Queen's Park, I fear, oversimplifies that issue, and boils it down to, well, there are people who can pay and people who can't, and how can you ask people to pay more? Well, people are paying more because they're wasting time, they're losing time, their quality of life is affected. So that's the discussion that we're entering right now, and it's taking the Metrolinx report and saying, okay, which parts of this are we're going to be able to work with, and which parts do we have to modify somewhat?
So still more discussion to come.
Yeah, and that was always the intention, that Metrolinx did its process, went through its process, made some recommendations to us, and now we're going to make the final decision. And it will be part of a legislative discussion. There will be a debate in the legislature about it.
Okay. I want to get back on track talking a little bit more about leadership and about your style of leadership. As somebody who's been elected to lead the province of Ontario, what do you think of the leadership happening at Toronto City Hall right now?
Oh my! I think that there are real personal problems that are surfacing at City Hall, and I feel worried. I will say I feel worried about the what's going on at City Hall. I think that there's a lot of confusion about exactly what has happened and what is going to happen. I think that councillors and, quite frankly, the mayor, I think they're trying to do their best to say we can continue and that it's business as usual. But I think those personal problems are going to have to be resolved, and that's, it's difficult because the personal issues are kind of colliding with the political realities and the need to make decisions on very difficult files. And I used the word distraction at one point. I think that there's a lot of distraction going on at City Hall right now, and that's difficult. It's difficult to lead, it's difficult to govern when the ability to focus is compromised, because there are, I heard on the radio the executive committee, members of the executive committee this morning saying, they've got a 3-inch agenda to deal with at executive committee. Well, if there are real substantive issues that have to be dealt with, and there's a personal challenge that is taking away from the focus, that's very hard. So I'm concerned about how that's going to unfold.
As the leader of this province on the international stage, how difficult does that make your job when your capital city for the province of Ontario is, being mocked by late-night comedy show hosts? I'm sure you saw some of it. Mm-hmm. Did you not cringe a little bit as a Torontonian? Did you not cringe as the Premier saying, "That's my Toronto they're talking about"?
Well, it makes me worry about how we go to the next step. There's a bit of a sense as a politician when you wake up in the morning, it's dark, 5:30, you go and get the newspaper. I still take a newspaper. I still get that paper newspaper. And I kind of open the front page and wonder what's going to be on the front page. I have to say this morning, coming to this event, I was so pleased that our moves on gender equity on boards was above the fold on the Globe and Mail. Excellent. But you can't plan that stuff. It's really hard to plan that stuff. So you just never know what is going to be in the news. And so, I'm going to try not to be in any way smug about this situation, because if you've been in politics, you know that you're a hair's breadth away from some kind of disclosure about something, not maybe about my own personal life, but about somebody around me or some member of the team. Because human beings have lives. They have complicated lives. We've all made mistakes. We've all got things that we have either chosen to talk about or not to talk about.
Would you like to talk about some of them now?
Well, Actually, my style has been to say, you know what, I call it the Norma Ray kind of approach. Like, how many of you have seen Norma Ray? You know that movie? Mm-hmm. Right. And she pulls her kids out of bed and she sits them down and she says, they're going to say nasty things about your mama. And she tells them about her history and who their dads are. And so my style has been to say, I'm just going to open up my closet, literally. I'm a lesbian. I came out when I was 37. My kid's dad and I worked out an arrangement that really was not very popular in North Toronto. And so I've tried to tell people those stories so that they would understand who I am, mm-hmm. because I don't know how to do it any other way. I don't know how to not bring that to my work because it's formed me. And so I'm less worried about, that people may find out I was a cheerleader in grade 9, but, and that wasn't a pretty sight, but.
Do you remember any of the cheers?
I do, actually. It was at Richmond Hill High School. But all I'm saying is human beings are frail. Human beings make mistakes. And my belief is that the more we can tell each other about what we've done in our lives and how we've coped with those things, the more we learn from each other and the better off we are. And if we don't do that, then those things become baggage and they're more difficult to deal with.
So would your advice be full disclosure?
Absolutely. I mean, that is my advice to people in politics, you know. Let folks know who you are, and I mean, not to burden people with, nobody needs to go through some kind of psychodrama with me, but it is important for people to know who we are. And, you know, I made a speech the other day and I talked about being a mother and what being a mother helped me to bring to my political life. And I talked about multitasking, which I'm sure you know a lot about, and being able to keep the thread when everything around you is insane. Yeah. And you know, that somebody came up to me afterwards and said, I'm so glad you talked about being a mother, because it's like it's a forbidden subject, you know? We don't talk about that as a skill set. We don't put it on our resumes and say, this actually has prepared me for lots of things about life and about politics and about the business world, for heaven's sake. So, so I think bringing our whole selves, whether we're women who have been mothers or whether we're men who have had a different experience, I think bringing our whole selves helps us as people to understand how the world works. If we pretend that we've all had a very narrow and traditional experience, I don't know those people. I don't know those people for whom, you know, they've just moved from point A to point B to point C. Everybody veers off. It's just very difficult to find someone who has had an absolutely straightforward trajectory. And if they have, then the fun is yet to come, right?
Okay. I know that our time is limited, so I want to make sure we get into some of your leadership style. Lean In is a very popular book, and if you've seen Sheryl Sandberg's talk on TED Talks, anybody, lots of nodding heads, you've read the book or you've seen the TED Talks on it. Her philosophy is, and I don't know, Premier Wynne, have you read the book or you're familiar with it?
I haven't, but it's on the pile beside my bed.
I doubt it is. So CEO of Facebook, and her philosophy is women need to remember to lean in when they're at a discussion, when they're in an issue of leadership. Sometimes as women, we will tend to stand back. Somebody else had an interesting comment on leadership one time. They said that women are very uncomfortable owning their success. So if somebody says to you, you know, congratulations on becoming premier, a woman might say, well, you know, I had a great team and I brought everybody in and whatever, whereas a man
I think I've already said that.
Right, you did. And whereas a man would say,
on script,
thank you. And they would leave it at that.
Yeah.
So tell us about your leadership style. I love that we have a Canadian example. You're the first woman premier. So tell us about your leadership style.
Well, you know, as I say, I think I've already said I had a great team. Because I believe that. You know, I don't believe I do these things by myself. I think that it's really important to me to have the right people around me. I never think I'm the smartest person in the room, you know, and I want those people around me.
But those people around you are going to come to you for leadership.
Yeah, and I'm very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with synthesizing what I've heard, and I'm very comfortable with helping people find their paths, but I still don't accept that it's all about me at the end of the day. You know, I really feel that I am strongest when I'm leading from inside. It's interesting, and I can trace this back very far in my life. There used to be an experience in Ontario where grade 11 students were sent to athletic leadership camp. So this is a million years ago. It was 1969. And I can remember when I graduated from high school, my coach read the note that had been written on my little evaluation after that. And they talked about leading from within the group. That was how I had operated. Now, at 16 or whatever it was, I had no kind of critical distance on how I led, or that I was a leader at all. But I had been sent to this camp, and I had done this 2-week stint, and that was what they picked up, that I led from inside, that I helped other people to take responsibility, and that stuck with me. I remembered that as being something that I was proud of, and so I've always seen myself in that way, and I think it is how I've been successful, because I've helped other people to feel like they're part of something. So, in my own riding, I have hundreds of volunteers who have been with me from the beginning when I ran for school trustee, and I honestly believe that one of the reasons that they've stayed with me is that they felt like they're part of something, and that they have the opportunity to influence the way I think, the way we operate. And I just believe that that is the way we make really good decisions. It's why in my leadership bit I said that as a minority government, we needed to find a way to work better with the opposition, you know, and that's why I've met with the leaders of the opposition. I think that whether we're in minority government or not, good ideas can come from anywhere, and so having a relationship with those leaders is really important to me.
Do you worry ever, though, about giving away some of your power? I think sometimes women in a position of leadership, the fear about being too inclusive is that maybe then you will lose some of your authority.
It's interesting, because I think you become more powerful if you have a loyal team around you. You know, I think if people look to me for good decisions and good process and inclusion, then I'm building loyalty, and that gives me not just positional power, but it gives me moral authority to work with the people who are part of that team. So I don't actually put a lot of stock in the positional authority. I always feel that I have to earn the respect of the people around me in order to be able to have that leadership role.
One last question for me, and then I want to make sure we have time for our ladies here to have a chance to ask you questions. Do you ever feel the weight of being the first woman, being the first openly gay premier? Do you feel the weight of being the first?
I think I feel the weight of the responsibility of the decisions more than the weight of being the first, because
this is interesting about you. People make a big deal about you being gay, and people make a big deal about you being women, and you see that flip-flop, you know, depending on which organization you're reading, which media outlet you're reading. This is not a big deal for you.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like, how do you feel about being 5'4"? I don't know.
That's a good point.
I've never been 5'10", so I don't know what that feels like. So I don't really know how to talk about how it feels to be a woman in this role, because I've never been a man in this role, you know? I've only been me. And so, you know, I can talk a little bit more about being a lesbian in this role, or being a lesbian, period, because I didn't know till I was 37 that, slow learner, I didn't know that that's who I was. So that, I've got a little bit more critical distance on that, because I was, you know, living a life of heterosexual privilege, and then I stepped over the line, and so I've got a little bit of point of comparison there. But I have no point of comparison on being a woman. So for me, it's like, this is really quite something to be the premier of the province. But being the first woman premier, where I really feel that is when people come up to me with their daughters, particularly these moments where people come up to me with their little girls and they want to have a picture taken. And they want to have a picture taken because they are so proud of me being there and what that means for their daughters. And it makes me emotional even thinking about it, because those mothers, the kids don't really know. They're kind of like, okay, whatever. who are you, and why am I having my picture taken with you? But the moms, you know, the young moms who know why this is important for their daughter, and they're going to have that picture, and they're going to be able to say, you had your picture taken with the first woman premier. Then I can get some distance on it, and I can feel proud of us. You know, I feel proud of us that we've done that. And people go back to my leadership speech when I said that I didn't think the people of Ontario or the Liberals had it in their hearts to judge people based on gender or on sexual orientation. And I believe that so strongly. And the issue's gone away. I don't get asked about it. I go all over the province. I go to rural communities. I meet people in Tim Hortons. People do not ask me about it. Now, you know, would they ask me about it? Maybe not. But
Chatham and Tim Hortons, that might not come up.
No, but they might not leap out of their chairs to shake hands with me if they really were worried about it. And that's what happens. People get out of their seats. They're happy to meet me. And, you know, they may be conservatives and they may never, ever, ever vote for me. But they are wanting to make a connection. And whether I'm a lesbian or not, they are interested in meeting me. So that's who I think Ontarians are.
You're very okay with who you are. You're very concerned about leading, but you're very okay with who you are. And I think, does that have something to do with coming out at 37, taking a look at your life, taking stock, going through some hard decisions, taking a look at what it might cost you personally, professionally, having the bravery to live an authentic life? And does that sort of form who you are now?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to imagine for me anything more difficult than that few years when I was coming out, and realizing that in my neighborhood, people were crossing the street so as not to talk to me. And my kids at school were, you know, I had the principal and teachers at the school saying, you know, your kids need a man in their lives.
People said that to
They
you?
have a father, yes. Yeah, that there was too much female influence. There wasn't enough male influence. This was 1990, 91, 92. And thinking, but their dad lives across the yard. so you know,
that's not your business.
Yeah. So it's hard to imagine anything personally more difficult than that. Got through that, lived through it, learned an enormous amount from it, and you know, so the things that I deal with now are hugely difficult, but they don't get at my core. You know, they're about making the world better, they're about doing my job, they're about being responsible and articulating our challenges, but they're not about attacking me as a human being, and I get that, you know, I really understand that. So when I'm in question period and I'm taking that, you know, I'm engaging in that banter, it's, at some level it's political theater, at some level it's a real engagement on issues, but we can't take it personally. And that's one of the things, we were just talking about that, talking to young women about getting involved in politics. You have to know who you are. You have to be able to stand your ground and say, this is what I believe in, because I've done my work. I know why I'm in this, and I know what's going to threaten me and what's not. And then you can take on the world, because you know, then it becomes a discussion about the real issues, and that's where I think I am right now.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
We want to take some questions. Tons of questions. And we are short on time, so I want to make sure if you've got a question, put your hand up quickly. We've got a microphone. They'll bring it over to you. Can you see them there, Andre?
There. Great. I'm having trouble getting to this side. Hello over here.
Yeah.
Will I kick off? Great. Hi, good morning. I'm Helen Giffen. I absolutely agree, Premier, with your focus in the short term. Balancing the budget, getting our deficit in order, dealing with infrastructure issues, dealing with social programs in the right way. So my question has to do with more of a priority and focus on a longer-term horizon. And the question is education reform. Worldwide, we see in Europe, we see in the US, we even see in places like Singapore, that education programs are being redefined for the 21st century. Questions of collaboration, innovation, a different style of critical thinking, a different way of working. How will we tackle education reform in this province to ensure that we have the kind of human capital, the kind of young people emerging from these programs that can help build and grow this economy long term?
It's a great question. And you know what's interesting about some of those examples that you name, Singapore, for example, we've had educators from Singapore come to Ontario to look at how we do our work and how we instill creativity and tap into creativity in kids. We've had people from Western Europe, certainly when I was Minister of Education, come to look at how we integrate, for example, kids with special needs into our classrooms. So there's definitely an exchange of information across those education communities. And you know, we have, for example, a lot to learn from Finland in terms of how they help their kids to achieve. But we have a unique history here in Ontario in our education system, and you know, some differences from all of those jurisdictions in terms of our diversity, for example, in terms of our commitment to a broad education. If we look at Germany and some of the Western European countries, very, very early on, kids are streamed into different paths, and it's harder to move out of those, whether they're into a technology stream or an art stream. Anyway, I won't go on for hours. I'm looking over at Erin McGinn. We know we could talk about this for a very long time, but I won't do that. But what I will say is, you are absolutely right. We have to transform and continue, I would say, continue to transform the system. So what I've said is that we need to look at how we start to measure, and I use that word advisedly, not that we create new tests necessarily, but we need to measure our outcomes on different kinds of scales, like, are we helping our kids to develop critical capacity? Are we helping them to work in teams? Are we tapping into their creativity in the ways that we should? So, for example, our arts education in our school system. Have we done enough in terms of arts education? I would argue no, we have not. I'd argue actually that we've removed some of that capacity from the system. So how do we make sure that that is there, and how do we measure the impact of having that kind of program in our schools? So that's one piece of it. The second piece, and that ties into the long-term vision of the job market and what our economy is going to look like and where we're going to fit in terms of the global economy. Have we developed enough opportunities for kids to develop the skills they need to be entrepreneurs, to be able to work in the way that businesses need them to work now, to change, you know, to be able to develop ideas quickly? I think kids have the capacity. I think sometimes the way we set up our classrooms, the way we teach, actually drums that out of them rather than allowing it to flourish. So that's exactly what we're asking the Minister of Education to look at right now.
Question?
Good morning. You had mentioned earlier that you recently spoke about your ideas of motherhood and how that's impacted your leadership role and perhaps how the way that you've looked at leadership. And I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective there.
Well, I think it's on a number of levels. You know, the research shows that if you can get 30% of your elected officials to be women, if 30% of your elected officials are women, different issues start to be talked about. And you know, at the risk of some sort of essentialism, which I don't buy into, but the reality is that those issues that we have traditionally called women's issues are human issues. And if you have been someone who has had a family, has been in contact, even, you know, as an aunt, as a mother, whatever, as a sister, the way we're socialized, we bring up different issues. We think about issues from a different perspective. We are more inclined to worry about the greater good and the people who are vulnerable. That's just the way we're socialized. So I think my experience as a mother is that, you know, is that I cannot sit at a table and talk about poverty without thinking about the mother who's trying to feed her child. I can't get that image out of my mind. I can't, when I'm talking about transit, think about transit without thinking about the mom who's having to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get her kids to school so she can go to work so she can feed them. So I believe that those experiences inform the way I deal with issues. But I think on another more logistical level, you know, being a mother and working and being a volunteer all at the same time, which is what I did in my early years. I was at home for a few years just without working, but then very soon, when my third child was 8 months old, I was working part-time from then on, and being a community volunteer. So you have to be able to juggle a lot of balls if you are doing that. You absolutely have to. This young woman sitting beside me has triplets. She's here. She's worked right through, and she's remarkable. And I have to give someone who's had that experience a bit of extra credit. And so if I see a resume with a woman who's had kids and has raised them and is sitting in front of me all put together and all smart, I got to give them a whole lot of credit, because I know what they've gone through to get there.
Yes.
And you only have to receive so many faxes on the top of your washing machine while you're trying to make lunch to know that really it takes a certain kind of talent to be able to juggle all those streams.
Do your eyeliner in the back of a cab so that you look good for the premier. That takes a lot of talent, I tell you.
Precisely.
We have time for one more question, then I know you have to go. We have our last question. Terrific. And you're right underneath the light. Can you tell us your name?
Sorry about that. I can move over a little bit here.
Terrific.
Jennifer Keesmaat, Chief Planner here in the City of Toronto. Premier Wynne, it's an absolute inspiration to hear you speak. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm actually going to do something a bit unfair and lob a question to you that was lobbed to me a few weeks ago, and I stumbled around answering it.
We're very happy you're there, by the way, at City Hall. We're very happy you're there.
And the question is this: we know that the future of our economy in this province depends on securing that precious cohort of 18 to 34-year-olds and ensuring that they thrive.
Yes.
We also know that this is a cohort that is much less politically engaged than the boomer generation, and we run a risk of, in fact, continuing to plan our cities and planning our province in an old way rather than a new way. And we know that this cohort of 18 to 34-year-olds, they want walkable communities, they want great transit, they want cycling, they want to be able to cycle in their cities. Could you speak a little bit to this issue of ensuring that we have good political representation and participation from the cohort that is in fact our future?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one of the things that is really preoccupying me at the moment, Jennifer. And here's why. We've got an aging demographic. Now, we talk about the aging demographic in Canada and Ontario. We talk about it usually in the context of healthcare. We talk about it usually because my knees are falling apart and I'm the baby boom, and you know, somebody's going to have to pay to keep me walking into my 80s. Well, that's one way of looking at the aging demographic. The other way of looking at it is, wow, we've got a preponderance of people who think in a different way than those 18 to 34-year-olds. We better figure out a way to tap into those voices, because the baby boom generation is so self-absorbed, and I can say that because I'm part of it. We think we invented everything. And so my dad tells me that. He's 86. He says, yeah, just think you invented everything. And you know, we run the risk as a society of now gearing ourselves to dealing with the baby boom generation and just assuming that the generations coming behind are just going to be good with that and they're just going to support us. That's not the case. They're not going to be happy doing that. I know that. And so we need to find a way, and I think we need to find some structural ways, Jennifer, structural ways. I'm not sure what they are yet, and I think we need to talk more about it. But where are those voices? Because the other thing is that a lot of those young people are working in different ways, right? They're starting their own businesses. They're not necessarily haunting the halls of power the way we would want them to be in speaking up. So we got to find them. We've got to bring them out. And in political circles, it's talked about in terms of, well, how do we deal with social media and how do we make sure that we engage people? But sometimes that's just about getting their vote, and that's not good enough. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do we actually get the conversation going that allows us to know what they're really thinking? Because remember, an 18-year-old has grown up now with a totally different view of who friends are. I mean, friends are online. Friends aren't necessarily people that you see every day. They communicate completely differently. What's a landline? They don't, you know. When I tell 18-year-olds that I didn't have a television in my house till I was 18, I mean, honestly, I could be a dinosaur. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So that reality changes the way they see the world.